My name is Niko Neugebauer, and let's go. We don't have a lot of time, but we have a lot of content. So my introduction, it really doesn't matter. I'm just another IT data professional who happens to like Microsoft Data Platform that much that I switched the sides, and right now I'm helping to create, build, and shape Azure SQL Managed Instance, the subject of our presentation. To connect with me, just Google the name on the, or search my name on the social media, on LinkedIn or Twitter to connect. Happy to oblige. So today's agenda: introduction, app modernization made easy with Azure SQL Managed Instance, and you want to go, oh, no, he's going to put some marketing. Like, no, not really. So then we'll go to just take a look at what was added to Azure SQL Managed Instance in the previous 12 months. We are recording this session in November of 2021, just a short reminder, and we'll talk about then the hybrid flexibility, hardware performance and scalability, and in the end, modern security. With that, just a short reminder, because I assume most of you have heard at least a couple of thousand times what Azure SQL is, but I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page. So Azure SQL is a family of the SQL Cloud databases. We have an infrastructure as a service offer, which basically are virtual machines, SQL VMs. And we have a platform as a service offerings. Here we have a Azure SQL Managed Instance. It's the subject of my today's presentation. And we also have Azure SQL Database with a regular offering, a serverless compute, and also a hyperscale offering. Each one of them offers you a different advantage and focus. SQL VMs on Azure, they provide you one by one kind of like a migration path. If you are still not ready to migrate to platform as a service, Azure SQL Managed Instance is the default destination for your legacy application, which you are taking and delivering to us, to Microsoft, to manage and run for you. And if you are developing a new application, a cloud-born application, you should be considering Azure SQL Database or one of its flavors. And it's basically, you know, the trade-off is familiarity and the flexibility, as you can see on the image. Some introduction for Managed Instance. We target the maximum compatibility of the regular SQL Server offer. Think of Managed Instance as the closest you can get to a SQL Server running and being patched and updated and secured in the cloud. So you will get rid of perpetual major version upgrades and end of life, end of support, the version. Basically, it's versionless, evergreen version. And if you think like, and sometimes I get this question, people like, oh, so what is the SQL Server version Managed Instance runs? And I can tell you, Managed Instance run the latest and the greatest. And that means beyond the latest available to the market. And the latest and greatest available currently, besides the announced on the Ignite 2022, is SQL Server 2019. So Managed Instance is 2019 plus all the new features that we have been adding towards the what will become SQL Server 2022. Some of them have some differences, but you know, we go into the details. We give you 4 nines on the SLA. It's financially backed up. You can get a premium support. You can have all the different services. And we focus on integrating the new services in Azure as they are going to be built up. We focus a lot on the security. Some of you might even notice that by default, when you create a managed instance, you will not have a public endpoint because we just allow you to connect you within the same virtual network because, you know, we care so much, we build a whole virtual cluster to deploy your managed instance. And these are the announcements we did just 2 weeks ago at Microsoft Ignite at fall of 2021, but we will go them into the details. So how did we spend the last 12 months before that? In the last 6 months of 2020, there were 11 updates. Some of them had to do with security, such as the Azure Active Directory integration. Some of them had the performance improvements, such as the log throughput. Be aware when you judge a managed instance that you are judging by the latest updates we have delivered and not by the older blog posts, because as you know, cloud progresses quite fast. Then in the first half of the 2021, we delivered 13 updates, and there were more stuff to connect with the security, such as the Azure Active Directory only in the public preview. We put into general availability machine learning services, and there were some other integrations, such as Monitor SQL Insights. If you don't know this one, just check it out. Just Google Bing it. Use whatever engine serves best for you. Monitor SQL Insights, very, very delightful service where you can integrate all different offerings, not only in the cloud, but also on premises in one single plane. That's currently in the public preview. So in the sum, before the Ignite of 2021 in the fall, we had 25 updates delivered. And you might ask, why? Wait, Niko, are you fooling somebody? I'm like, why? 11 plus 13, that's 24. That's not 25. Oh, that's right. Just forgot. In September, just 2 months ago, we pretty much silently, because I think it deserves a bigger hype, we introduced the full CRUD support for the Terraform operations. That means you can run your Terraform scripts for creating, updating, or deleting managed instances. Okay. And with that, let's take a look at the really interesting stuff. Are you ready? Let's go. So on the hybrid flexibility, we are introducing something we call Managed Instance Link. This is one of the kind of like a super scenarios that were revealed for SQL Server 2022. But as you can see on my slide, I'm mentioning here 2019. So what is a Managed Instance Link? Managed Instance Link is a connection that you can establish from SQL Server running on premises, on Azure, on any other cloud, and you can connect it directly, given that you have all the network path open and with respective permissions. You can establish a managed instance to which you will be replicating asynchronously the information. So it's a kind of a read-only replica. So 2 key scenarios we are unlocking for you is if you want to deliver a read-only workload for some customers anywhere in the world, like, oh, I'm based in Portugal, like, oh, but we've got a customer in Australia. We need them to do some readings of our data. We don't want to impact our primary nor any of our secondaries. You know, you can create a managed instance in Australia and replicate the data. The more the distance will be, the more the lag will be. So it's not a real time, but it will be as close as your network latency and your respective network workloads will allow. If you put in the gigabytes per second into SQL Server, don't expect that, you know, physics will work differently as they work in the real life. And then the second scenario we're enabling is the seamless and instant database migration to Azure. So using this link, you can establish the connection and then do an almost online migration to managed instance. If you want to learn more, go to AKMS MI link. You can see it on your screens, okay? Would you like me to tell you more, or would you like me to get off the slides and show you a demo? I think the second part sounds more interesting. Let's try it out. So as you can see, I am here running a SQL Server 2019. I'm sorry, the Zoom here for some reason works really strange. So that's a SQL Server 2019. Below is a SQL Managed Instance. Let's refresh. I have no databases on both sides. So what should we do? Let's go here to my script, connect to SQL Server, and let's create a database, which I will call SQLMI demo. I will just pump up a little bit the data file and the log file, and then I will just want to establish a real link to managed instance. What kind of this technology are we using underneath? I'll tell you right away. We are using the updated distributed availability groups, or so-called DAG, to deliver this technology. So what do you need to do to start the sitting in availability group? You need to ensure your database has a full backup. Don't follow this as a best practice, backing up to some temp database, to some temp location. This is only for the demo purposes. Please make sure you take backups in the right path. So what should I do then to establish link? Let's do the right click. And here I have a new menu in my management studio, which is called Azure SQL Managed Instance link. Let's select it. Let's click once again, and let's create select the first option, attach database. Next, server requirements. Don't look at them like the definitive and final list. We are currently in a limited public preview, but you need to comply with the server requirements. Make sure you're not using something we are currently not supporting as a file stream, for example, or auto close. Then you need to comply with availability group requirements, and you click next. Next step, you need to log into your Azure account. So,
Mikhail, do you want to do that first question then whilst Niko's doing his authentication?
Yes, we can do that. This is actually related to what you're showing us.
Mhm.
We heard a slight rumor about managed instance being able to have the primary role in a distributed availability group. Is that true, and does it work latency-wise?
So that's a rumor. I do not recall anyone in the product group ever mentioning that. I would like to know, where does this come from? And,
was it not the 2022 update that said that it could participate as a full member in the availability group?
So it does participate as a full member of availability group on the right side as a read-only workload. That's it.
Okay. And we have also a new question about that managed instance context menu in SSMS. Is that in the latest update, or how do we get it?
You can get it by signing up. I will provide you once again the link to sign up. And you
okay,
can
it's a sign up for the managed instance.
It's a limited public preview. Yes, this is not the option you will find in any management studio currently available.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So I logged in. Let's go. So I selected the managed instance where I want to land. I need to log in. I need to make sure that all the certificates on both sides are correct. I can correct the server IP address if it is wrong for some reason. We determine it by default, and I can specify the name of the availability group and the distributed availability group. With that, I just click finish, and it will proceed with seeding my database. You can see the availability groups. The availability group and distributed availability groups have been already created. I just need to close it. Let's go to my managed instance, refresh it, and it takes a couple of seconds to land. You might ask why. You can see it started. The thing is, any database that lands in the managed instance needs to be registered with all the respective services and be available on the portal and everywhere. And it's not a trivial process, so it takes a couple of seconds. Okay, I have established the link. Right now, my database on SQL Server running on Azure SQL VM is being replicated to my database here on Azure SQL Managed Instance. With that, let's connect to the managed instance. And you can see that's a managed instance database with a unique ID for the cluster name. And if I check out the status of my database, it's a read-only, as you would expect from any availability group, right? It's read-only. Sorry, this Zoom works strangely for me. So what do I want to show you? I'll just go and create a table in my SQLMI demo table database, and I'll run a workload committing some transaction for some time. And on the managed instance side, I will just run the query of getting the max, and you'll see how it gets the data replicated. I can say in real time, but you know that it always depends, right? So the moment I'll stop the workload and get back, I'll run, and you see just by switching, I have already instantly stopped at the same last ID when I switched back around 14,000, okay? So it stopped doing the replication. Let's do the failover. The failover as a migration. That's one of the key scenarios. Right-click, managed instance link, migrate database to cloud. I need to sign in. Then my databases, actually my databases within my managed instance will be listed. I need to select the right one. I need to log into it, have all the usual rights that will be needed. And then I can do one of the two cutover types. One of them is a planned one. I guarantee that all the workload or writing workload into my database has stopped. And then I can go advance and do the failover. Or like within the availability groups, I can do, unsynced one, just fail it over. There is something wrong. Let's try first this one. Let's delete both the availability group and distributed availability group. And what it will do, it will even ensure that the log sequence numbers called LSNs are equal on both sides. We'll do up to 3 attempts in guaranteeing that. The first one was successful, so the second and the third were not needed. And then we do the planned failover and then dropping unnecessary information. Don't take it as a final version. That's limited public preview phase we're currently in. So after we did the failover, what happens to our database on managed instance? It should become writable, right? And here we go. You can see that right now it is a read-write workload, right? So I can write into my database. We did a full failover. And while I'm having a link, I can still create the databases in parallel. It doesn't really matter. The managed instance is still able to get a writable workloads for the other databases and workloads. Just the database, which is a secondary, of course, cannot be written into. That's basically the demo I have for you right now. Any questions with that, or are we just switching and go forward?
Chad asked, which editions of SQL 2019 and above support MI link?
That's a good question. We have publicly announced the support of 2019, and we didn't go into the details of the editions. As we will be approaching the release of 2022, we will be specifying that. But let me assure you that we would love to keep you very, 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 very happy.
As a side note of the question, could you move the instance database back to your on-premises server now? Or is this a one-way migration?
So as all of you who are aware of the differences in the code of the versioning of the databases, it's a very, very complicated process. So my answer will be that we're looking to allow you to migrate back to 2022. So one of the demos that was shown on the Ignite, if I would have more time, I would happily show. I have the server that you can take a backup from managed instance and restore it to what will become a SQL Server 2022. Okay.
Just one quick question, Nico, on
Sure.
when you're doing the failover. Is there any diagnostic information published into the SQL Server logs of each instance? Well, one of the things that springs to mind is it'd be nice to have an LSN printed there, just so of peace of mind.
Great question. We can take a look. I am not aware. It's just, it's a failed update replica state. Yeah, so I'm not sure. I'll take it as a feedback. This to my colleague who is driving this feature, to Dani Liapava. There is still time. Once we will do the limited public preview and then the full public preview, we're looking to improve. And that's a great suggestion, Mark. Thank you. Okay, let's switch back to slides, if nobody minds. So, because I have pretty lot of the information, trust me, and I would like to show you at least one more demo. So, managed instance link now allows you close to near real-time migration to Azure. This will give you the best migration path to Azure. Of course, if you are using transactional replication, it serves for you, it's fine as well. So another key point, we are currently will be asking you, if you're migrating multiple databases, to create a managed instance link on database basis. So for a single managed instance, you can create up to 100 of managed instance links. I told you about these scenarios, so you can use a read-only secondary, so scale-out scenarios, or connecting your Power BI, your Synapse, your other read-only applications, and place it anywhere where it's closer to your client. The other scenario is doing the near real-time migration. We did both of them. You can also do the consolidation. We will allow you to use a multiple SQL Server as a services and migrate to a single managed instance. And the same works the way that you can use one SQL Server and migrate its databases to multiple managed instances with managed instance links. You can have a huge on-premises or cloud SQL Server, and you might choose multiple managed instances for whatever business reasons or technical reasons you choose to. So how do you sign for it? Please, here are two links, AKMS MI link and AKMS MI link. Sign up with dashes. Feel free to sign up. Just a word of important advice that I want to give everyone who is aspiring. Bring a very good business case. We have seen a very astonishing interest, and in order to get signed up and approved for a limited public preview, make sure that you bring a good business case. Let's take a look at the managed instance hardware performance and scalability, and what we just announced 2 weeks ago at Ignite. So with that, we announced new hardware generation. We announced large instances, and I don't know if I have a time for demo, but I have slides to show you. But that's our real demos. I wrote them. So, or maybe I faked it up, right? So no, I didn't. And I give you the guarantee that they work because I actually created them. So we heard the customer requests and feedback that customers were wanting to have more space and less cores because we have a certain limitations. And what we did, we announced larger storage limits, more memory per vCore, more storage per vCore for some of the combinations, and more IOPS per vCore. Talking about the new hardware generation SQL Managed Instance, the Gen 5 series, we renamed them, and they are currently the standard series. They were based on Broadwell, Skylake, and Cascade Lake Intel CPU processors, and their clock speed would be 2.3, 2.5 gigahertz. The new hardware that we just added to Azure. It's a premium series and premium series memory optimized. It's Ice Lake and it has a 2.8 gigahertz, so highest CPU frequency. It has the AVX 512 for all those batch mode fans of you, and all the other great improvements. And we have seen up to 15% performance just by the Azure compute side. And we are testing, we are looking forward to publish the numbers and looking forward to our partners publishing the numbers of what this will bring, what kind of the performance improvements it will bring for different workloads. One of the key limitations of the Gen 5 or the standard series was 5.1 gigabytes of memory per vCore. So if you go the highest SKU with 80 CPU vCores, you would get 408 gigabytes of memory. And as you know, databases, they need a lot of memory. And we've seen customers paying for a lot of extra cores just to get the more memory, just to sustain the workload. With new hardware generation, we give you two options. So premium series gives you 7 gigabytes of RAM per vCore, maxing at 560 gigs in the total. And the memory optimized premium series gives you a whopping 13.6 gigabytes of RAM per vCore. And with current limit of 64 vCores, it gives you more than double. From 408 gigs, you can reach right now with 870 gigabytes of RAM per instance. So that's a really, really huge improvement. On the large instances, we announced the general availability of the 16 terabyte support for the general purpose SQL Managed instances. That's, you also need just 16 vCores to reach the 16 terabytes. That was a big request from a lot of customers. Don't forget, because the storage we're using currently on the general purpose, the remote storage, supports as a max 8 terabytes for a single file. So when you're looking for 16 terabytes, you need to create 2 data files, or you're using a huge log file whatsoever. I mean, huge log file is 2 terabytes, right? Don't forget that 8 terabytes is the limit for a data file. But that's a general availability, a big request. And we announced a public preview already available. You can go to portal and start playing with it. 16 terabytes on business critical service tier. Business critical service tier will run a availability group with 4 synchronous replicas for you. So that's kind of like, you can, if you go 16 terabytes behind the scene, we actually running 16 times 4. That's a little bit like 64 terabytes, not just 16. But we provide you with that, and it's a public preview. Go and try it out. Also, we lowered on the new premium series the request for, if you want to go for 2 terabytes on the business critical, you don't need just 24 vCores. You can go with 16. You can see in the orange. With premium series, we currently, and hopefully by the time you're looking at this recording, it's already quite different, better. But currently, as of today, we allow you out to 5.5 terabytes for 40, 64, and 80 vCores. And if you go premium series memory optimized, we allow you to reach the 16 terabytes with 64 vCores. And it's not the end, so stay tuned. Just 2 improvements we did under the hood in the during this year, not much fast, but we allowed you we run the backup, but we improve the backup and we do the parallel backup of your data files. So it will bring you the faster backups and less impact on your managed instances. And your copy-only backup will get you also a significantly better performance potentially. And then another important thing is that once there is a major disaster, or once you are creating, if you have just one instance within the availability group, on the business critical service tier, of course, there's no write workload, it's a read only. So traditionally we would start building 2 new instances. Once they're ready, we would declare it's available, you can write into it. And then we would build the 4th instance. So what we did, an improved replica build is, once again, from one replica being in read only, we do a very fast in-build. And once it's done, we allocated all the resources just for that. We declare your managed instance available already, and then we start doing a full speed in-build of the 3rd instance, and then a slow governed build in order to impact less the primary replica of the 4th instance. Just a little, improvement, but important to know, we are always looking into improving your availability. Just a review of what I told you. Something in the lower side on the price, on the standard series, it's unchanged. For vCore, it's 15% for the premium series, and then 61 versus the standard series. But we are very, very, very confident that they give much more than those price increases. We give, for premium series on average 22% better value and 68% better value for memory optimized premium series. Of course, you need to change to those premium or premium series memory optimized if your workload needs it. If your workloads run fine on standard series, please carry on with the standard series. There is nothing wrong with them. These are the regions currently available, but if you are watching this record, just go into the documentation and check it out, because some of the things are changing on a weekly basis. But those regions should be fine right now. If you're watching this live, you go to portal, you should be able to go and fire your instances. Just a little tip. In November, during November of 2021, this month, we will charge you only for the compute. We will not charge you for the licenses of your managed instance on premium and premium series memory optimized. You heard it here. And if you want to try it out or even compare the performance, now is the best time. So some preliminary TPCC results. We get for GP 40-60% better throughput and 20-30% lower latency, and business critical gets 40% better throughput with around 20% lower latency. So it's kind of like, it's pretty impressive. And on memory optimized, it will be amazing. We give you more than 2 times lower latency for general purpose and give you up to 3 times lower latency on the performance side for business critical. Some summary on TPCH side. So we did this test. We took some query from TPCH. We just decided we will not run it for 1 year on the order date column. We decided to take a little bit more information because the origin was just a 300 gigabytes TPCH database, and we run the query. So in order to fit into the time, I'll show you. So the first query runs 49 seconds on standard series, and the problem is you get a 6.2 gigabytes of RAM memory grant. That's on 8 CPU business critical service tier. And then here, this little hash match inner join will do a 680,000 pages spill into TempDB. That's pretty slow, right? Well, it needs more memory. So once we upgraded to premium series, we went to 43 and even I saw 41 seconds. Memory grant got bigger because we upgraded from 5.1 to 7 gigabytes of RAM per vCore. So we got almost 8.8 gigabytes of RAM memory grant. And even though we got 2 spills instead of 1, which pretty much scared me, I'm like, oh, will it be actually slower? we saw that lower number of pages, just 475,000 pages, were filled in TempDB, and that resulted in a good improvement of 6 seconds. And once we went to memory optimized, we got a whooping 18 gigabytes RAM memory grant, and we fell down to more than around twice, from 43 to 22 seconds, because that was really memory intensive workload. It's got the greatest benefit. And when you are looking to migrate to premium series or premium series memory optimized, make sure that your workloads truly benefit, that it really needs more memory. Otherwise, you just, throwing money on the wind. We don't want you. We want you to be happy. So some slideware around how much it is faster. It's really faster when you need it. And if you run a lot of parallel query, your memory grants, you'll see that you can run more queries in parallel according to the bigger amount of memory you have. And overall execution time will vary very significantly because of that. Or you will avoid those costly out of your web server with the default of 30 seconds timeout will not throw some very unpleasant responses to your customers. Slideware, anyway. With that, let's go into modern security. That's a really delightful topic. So, cloud migration and modern security. We introduced in Azure SQL in the last years some significant improvements like Azure Active Directory with password authentication, Azure AD Universal with multi-factor authentication, also the Azure AD integrated, but it's still not enough for some application. Some application cannot change to Azure Active Directory. It just doesn't work in some cases. So what should we do in this case? Let's switch to the demo. So let's connect to the managed instance. Let's select the right one and let's connect to it. So this is a regular managed instance. I can do all the tasks. I have the agent. I have the logs. I have all the usual things and rights I am using. Did you notice how I connected to my managed instance, by the way? Did you? Like really? Let me do it once again, but a little bit slower. So connect, database engine. Let me zoom in. And did you notice this little thing? That's a Windows authentication. Yes, currently in limited public preview, we just announced that we are supporting Windows authentication. So I can really connect to my managed instance just like that. Let me just get back. So it will work not only for direct authentication. We are supporting also a double hop scenarios. And let's go into the details. So we did these amazing, astonishing improvements. Why I'm so convinced? It's not because I work within this group, amazing group of the people, because my colleagues work on this pretty long time. And I have nothing to do with the delivery of these features. It's their fault. I mean, it's not fault. They should be praised for it. So on authentication, Windows authentication for Azure AD principles, Azure AD only mode, we GA'd it, so general availability, and you can use Azure AD authentication for linked server connections. We also started supporting user identified managed identities. No, user defined managed identities. So you can use user managed identities to run the managed instance and specify the permission, and it opens you scenarios. You can do open role set backup with your managed identity. You can even access Azure Key Vault with your managed identity. And on the service policies, a very juicy, small, but incredibly useful service endpoint policies improvement. So what are the things about the Windows authentication for Azure AD. So it's just another additional single sign-on option for Azure AD users. It works with legacy drivers that do not support Azure AD. It works both on the main joint and Azure Active Directory joint machine. It works for the double hop scenarios such as ES impersonation, as I mentioned. This setup, it's not that difficult. You need to synchronize AD, you need to set up trusted domain objects, set up the Kerberos proxy. If you're using traditional trust flow, you can also use the modern interactive flow for different kind of scenarios. And on the managed instance side, you just need to set up a managed instance service principal name, the SPN. Of course, you will need the Azure AD admin privileges for that, but documentation will be there, or it's already there available, so you can sign it up, and we are confident you will be able to set it up without big hassle. So what we did under the hood, it's a sync process that will synchronize your Active Directories into Kerberos realm of Azure AD, and using the Kerberos token, once you are logged in, the Azure AD will simply confirm to the managed instance, and your application, current application with Windows authentication. We had a demo with Excel, and I'm not showing you just because of the running out of time. You can use all of these paths to authenticate to managed instance. So you send the encrypted Kerberos ticket, it's exchanged for Azure AD token, and then as a result, your user is authenticated. Next one is Azure AD only authentication. It has been already for around a half year in the public preview, and we are just put it into the general availability. So when you go to Azure Active Directory admin, and please go now, if you have an Azure AD and you have enough rights, set up a Azure Active Directory admin. I keep on hearing, and I saw it myself, it can save lives, because if somebody does something wrong, you at least have the Azure Active Directory admin. Enabling this option of Azure Active Directory authentication only, you can forget and throw away all the sharing of the SQL authentication in the emails. I know none of you or none of your customers do that, but I kind of saw that in the real life when I was working for a customer, just like all of you or any of you do. Besides that, don't forget that you can set up an authentication policy for your whole subscription or for your resource group. We use this as a kind of enforcement for best practices. Don't forget about this option. Next one. Can't show you the demo, but you can go to PaaS Summit if you're still able to register. We had a session for 2.5 hours. I showed there that you can set up an Azure AD authentication for the linked servers. So this option will basically eliminate the need for the SQL authentication and the credentials. You can set it up, and you can use a Windows authentication. Works perfectly. Or you can use managed identities for that purpose, which is also a very, very interesting and nice scenario. Make sure you, of course, set up on the respective permissions and privileges on both sides, on both managed instances that are involved in this process. So with that, you can say my user will authenticate to my managed instance, and once they are hoping to another managed instance, they will have still limited scope according to your user. So maybe Niko cannot authenticate more, but Mark and Michael can authenticate. Or you can set up a managed identity for the linked server and say, you know what, if you have enough privileges on local managed instance to use this linked server, you will get with these limited credentials there, and that's how it works. both of the scenarios are enabled. The code to set it up is the same as you would do for the linked server. If you're working for a decade or two with with a SQL Server, you can do it, with one arm and without looking at the screen. Just an important thing: don't forget to add the SQL trust groups, because it's an important thing to establish the trust between multiple managed instances, as you would do for example, for the distributed transactions, which are already in general availability. That's a little thing we just did at Ignite 2021 fall as well. If you're using a managed identity to set up this authentication, you just, the only change is authentication and then the name of your managed identity. That's it. Don't forget the RPC to enable RPC and RPC output on both of them. Using managed identity in user scenarios. So by default, when we create or configure managed instance, you can go and unclick the default system assigned managed identity, which we will create for you, and set it to off, and then get and create user assigned managed identity. You can create multiple ones and then select the primary one, which will be used to run your managed instance. Okay. This opens all these wonderful scenarios as the private access to Azure Blob Storage, such as, for example, you can do a backup or restore, or you can use the bulk insert or open role set for your ETL operations, or using such operations as audit, which are still supported and running fine on Azure SQL Managed Instance. So what we did in this area is we created, first of all, Azure AD only authentication to managed instance to improve your security. We did also the Windows authentication for Azure AD that I explained, managed identity access to storage for backup, restore, bulk insert, and audit operations. Then the improvements for linked server using managed identities or Windows authentication, and another repetition, managed identity access to Azure Key Vault was a big request, or as is in Redmond lingo, ask. I love this word. A big request that the customers have made, and this scenario is available with these improvements. That's about it, but there is one thing I want to show you. That's the service endpoint policies. So by default, when you run a managed instance, you can access from it any storage. And that's fine, because we allow outbound. But it's not fine if you really care about the security. So what we did with this public preview of the service endpoint policies is that you can limit the storage accounts or specify them by deny all outbound except as named, and say, you know what, just these and that storage accounts are only available for you to use with your subnet. Such operations as backup and restore, auditing, X events, log replay, transactional replication, you can limit the scope, making the extraction of your data from managed instance much more complicated. And even if your managed instance is compromised, but your Azure account is still secure, the thief will not be able to export data, because it will be able to export only to the maybe should be monitored account if you really care about security. So what can you set up in the service endpoint policies? You can specify that all storage accounts in a subscription are accessible, or you can go and say all accounts in a specific resource group accessible, or you can go and say, you know what, from managed instances within this sub network, only the single storage account will be accessible, and that's it. Okay, it's easy to set up, very well documented, publicly available now. Go experiment, give us feedback. That's it. I mean, I should be quite on time, I believe, but we did 9 announcements at Ignite. Here they are. We GA, so general availability, available, supported, everything. 16 terabytes general purpose, 16 terabytes of business critical, amazing, 4 times improvement. I'm really happy that it's finally out. It's in the public preview. Premium series and premium series memory optimized queue in the public preview. Managed instance link or link feature for SQL Managed Instance in the limited public preview. Windows authentication in the public preview. Support for managed identities, Azure AD authentication for linked server scenarios. This data exfiltration protection is the service endpoint policies. And we finally allow you under certain conditions to move your managed instance between the subnets. Some restrictions do apply, very well documented. Here are all the links to find it out. That's it. Try it out. Sign up for the managed instance link. Otherwise, I'm happy to take all and any of your questions. Thank you so much for attending, and please try out managed instance and give us feedback.
Will we ever be getting a version of managed instance that is cheaper or can be paused or turned off? Because the current version is now ever running always.
That's a good question. That's a really, really, really good question. Stay tuned. That's what I can say. We are
Perfect.
aware of this request. We would love to do something about it. And yes, stay tuned.
Cool. So we've got a few questions on managed instance, a popular feature, it looks like, Niko. So next question is, does the managed instance link work exactly the same with standard edition, or are there bag-like limitations, so basic availability group limitations?
That's a great question. I will tackle it in a different way. Do you remember how many databases do we allow you to put in a single managed instance link? I mentioned it in the presentation. Mikhail, Mark, do you remember?
Was it 5, was it?
No, it's 1.
Oh, right, okay.
It works as a standard read-only replica for standard edition.
I didn't imply that. If you
Yes.
take any conclusion, that's about it.
Okay. Good
Right,
answer.
Subject to change, potentially, though.
Of course. Do not take anything for granted. It's a preview. It's not GA.
Yeah, yeah.
It might sound, at least I would love both of you guys to trust me. I work with incredibly striving overachiever who go above and beyond to deliver the best what is possible to the customer. So we are doing our best. I've seen this on the inside. I'm just 6 months within the managed instance team, so I'm just explaining.
We have a question from Az. That is seriously a real life question.
Oh God.
He has been around for a while. What if the on-premise instance is lagged behind the latest patch managed instance? How far can we afford to lag behind? 1 or more CUs, or is it even a version lag that is allowed to be able to migrate this read-only replica?
So if you look at what we are targeting, what we are publicly committed, 2019 CU13 plus, that is currently for the limited preview, and the future version of 2022. So we are not supporting just one version. There will be multiple versions. How it will look in the GA, I guess nobody can, make it 100% for sure, but we are definitely open for the feedback and for the requirements and for enabling the best scenario possible. That's it. I know it's not the answer like there's another robots as is looking for, but anyone who can deliver right now a promise, it's kind of like let us under promise and over deliver to you. I think you will be happy with that. More happy than any promise I would deliver to you now, and maybe it would not take place.
Great. So, Mikhail, do you want to take either the next question or the impossible question? Which one do you want to do?
Let's do the next one. Impossible is always good at the end.
I
can disconnect, yes. And then like, oh, so sorry.
This is a question for Niko as the Microsoft representative in the meeting, actually. How are you positioning the Azure Managed Instance now and in the foreseeable future? That is important. Will the use case remain for hybrid deployments or as a migration target? Or do you feel it's something that should be seriously considered for new enterprise database developments?
It's a great question. It's very, very, very interesting question, because I would say there is an official position that managed instance is great for the migrations of the SQL Server default migration when you migrate from on-premises or from other clouds. When you build a new application, Azure SQL database should be your main goal. But what if you need a feature like CLR, like something like agent, like inter-database communication that is not available in SQLDB? Then managed instance is your best friend. What if you need something like 100 terabytes? Why don't you go for hyperscale? Azure SQL database hyperscale. That's 100 terabytes. You can have it right away. There are places where we have an overlap and you can go either way and it's fine. I don't think there is a silver bullet. I don't think that managed instance will ever conquer total place, and it's not the objective of eliminating VMs or eliminating database, Azure SQL database. It will not be the case. None of these three options will eliminate the need of others. You need to look every application, analyze it individually, and take the best decision for your business currently and for the foreseeable future.
Great
that's
stuff.
My honest. That's Niko's personal opinion about this this question.
So we have a drum roll now for the impossible question.
Woo-hoo!
Right, let's get started. In 10 years' time, do you think that all the SQL Server family products, including Synapse SQL, will ultimately converge into one single scalable database model, or will there always be a divergence of functionality?
I have an impossible answer for that. Why in 10 years? And you can interpret that in so many ways. Maybe in 100. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe when you look at this record, we already have it. Who knows?
Yeah. One thing that's certain is I don't think you, me, or Mikhail will be around in 100 years' time to care. So
I don't know. I would never be sure. You know, I've been sure for so many things in my life, and the older I grow, the less sure I become.
I think that will conclude the question session. And as always, I say thanks for joining us to everybody, and a big thanks to Niko.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. It was a wonderful opportunity. I hope to get back one day, maybe by the next Ignite, maybe in a year, to bring you more exciting news, because we are not done yet. We're just starting.